Lady Maren Langley stood at the window of Briarfield's sitting room, her hand resting against the cold glass as October rain streaked the pane in silent rivulets. Outside in the lane, a man who had once been everything stood motionless, his coat abandoned somewhere behind him, his white shirt darkening with water. She had told him to leave 5 hours ago, certain she had finally heard the truth beneath his careful words. That she was capable, yes, but not enough. When Martha entered with the evening tea and Maren asked casually if the Duke had gone, the maid's answers split the afternoon in two. "How long has he been standing out there?" Maren had asked, her voice still steady. "Since you told him to leave, ma'am," Martha replied. And the physician's daughter, who had rebuilt her life around the word no, felt the architecture crack. The solicitor's office smelled of old paper and beeswax when Maren arrived on the 3rd Tuesday of September. She had dressed carefully that morning. Dark gray silk, widow's propriety without the veil she had abandoned after the first year. Robert had been dead 3 years. The world had stopped expecting her to perform grief, though it still expected her to wear it. Mr. Hadley rose when she entered, his expression carrying the practiced sympathy of a man who spent his life delivering other people's tragedies in measured tones. "Lady Langley, thank you for coming." "Edward's will?" she said simply, taking the chair he indicated. "You said it concerned me directly." "Yes. There is a matter of guardianship." Hadley glanced toward the door. "We are waiting for one other party." The door opened before Maren could ask who. She knew before she turned, knew from the quality of the silence that followed, the way the air in the room seemed to reorganize itself around a single point of gravity. Lord Nathaniel Calder, Duke of Dunmore, stepped into the room and stopped when he saw her. 5 years. 5 years since she had last been in the same room with him. He was 32 now, still the tallest man in any space he occupied, his shoulders carrying the title with the same steady composure she remembered. His face had changed, something in the set of his mouth, the brackets around it deepened by whatever he had done with the years since he walked away from her at 27. "Lady Langley," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. Low, careful, each word placed with the precision of a man who had learned early that speech was a form of architecture. Your Grace." She did not rise, did not offer her hand. Turned back to Hadley, as though Nathaniel were simply another piece of furniture in a room full of necessary objects. Hadley cleared his throat. "There's one more. Miss Lucy should be present for this." The door opened again, and a small girl entered, holding the hand of a woman Maren recognized as Mrs. Hewitt, Edward's housekeeper. Lucy Calder was 5 years old, dark-haired and solemn, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest with her free hand. "Aunt Maren." Lucy pulled free from Mrs. Hewitt and ran to Maren's chair, climbing into her lap with the unself-conscious ease of a child who had done it 100 times before. "Papa said you would be here. He said the solicitor's office is where people go when someone has to read important papers, and that you would come because you always come when he asks." Maren's arms closed around the child automatically, her throat tightening. "Yes, darling, I came." Lucy turned in her lap to look at Nathaniel, her expression curious. "Are you the Duke?" "Papa said the Duke is very tall and lives in a house with 47 rooms and doesn't smile very much." Nathaniel's mouth softened. Not quite a smile, but something that approached it. "I am, and your father was correct on all counts." "You both look sad," Lucy observed with the devastating directness of childhood. "Papa said sad people need tea in the garden. The garden is better, but tea helps." Hadley opened the document case on his desk, his movements careful. "Miss Lucy, your father left very specific instructions about your care. He wanted you to hear them yourself. So you would understand that everything he arranged was because he loved you very much." Lucy nodded solemnly, her hand finding Maren's and holding tight. Hadley read. Edward's will was characteristically thorough. Provisions for Lucy's education, her dowry, the management of her inheritance until she reached her majority, and then the section that had brought them all to this room. "Regarding the guardianship of my daughter, Lucy Catherine Calder," Hadley read, "I name 2 individuals to serve jointly in this capacity. Lady Maren Langley, whose wisdom and compassion I have relied upon since childhood, and my brother, Lord Nathaniel Calder, Duke of Dunmore, whose steadiness and honor I trust without reservation. They are to share all decisions regarding Lucy's upbringing, education, and welfare. But neither may act without the other's consent. They must work together, as I believe they are the only two people in this world who can give my daughter what she needs. The love of someone who knew her father as a friend, and the protection of someone who carries his name. The words hung in the air, like smoke after a candle is blown out. Lucy looked up at Maren. "Is this the part where I go to your house? Papa said your house is the one where you can see the sky from every window, and that I would like it there because you let children ask questions, and you know all the names of the plants in the garden." Maren's hand tightened on Lucy's. The child's weight in her lap, the trust in her voice. It was instinct, the way her body curved around this small person who had lost the only parent she had ever known. She looked up and found Nathaniel watching. Not her face, her hand where it held Lucy's. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes, something that looked almost like grief. "Yes, darling," Maren said quietly. "You will come to Briarfield." Nathaniel stood. "Lady Langley, perhaps we should discuss the arrangements." "At Briarfield," Maren said, her voice steady. "Not here." She rose, lifting Lucy onto her hip. The child wrapped her arms around Maren's neck, the stuffed rabbit crushed between them. Maren did not look at Nathaniel as she walked to the door. Did not acknowledge the way he moved, automatically, instinctively, to open it for her, his hand steadying Lucy's back as he guided them through. His palm brushed Maren's shoulder blade, a contact that was meant for the child but arrived on her body like a brand, until she stepped into the September afternoon and did not look back. Nathaniel arrived at Briarfield the next morning at 9 o'clock precisely. Maren received him in the sitting room, the same room where she had taken tea with Edward 100 times, where Robert had read by the fire in the evenings before the consumption made him too weak to hold a book. "Lucy is in the garden," Maren said without preamble. "She woke early. Mrs. Hewitt says that is normal. She has not been sleeping well since Edward died. I will speak with her." Nathaniel stood in the center of the room, his hands at his sides. He had not removed his gloves, had not sat down. The distance between them felt architectural, something load-bearing. "You will visit daily," Maren said. It was not a question. "Edward's will requires mutual consent. That cannot happen if you are at Dunmore Hall and Lucy is here. I will come every day, 9 to 6, if that is acceptable. It will have to be." He nodded once, turned toward the door, stopped. "Maren." "Lady Langley," she corrected, her voice quiet and absolute. His jaw tightened. "Lady Langley, I know this arrangement is not what either of us would have chosen, but Edward trusted us both. For Lucy's sake, I hope we can manage civility." "Civility?" Maren repeated. "Yes, I believe I can manage that, Your Grace." He left without another word. Lucy found Maren in the still room an hour later, her hands covered in dirt, her expression triumphant. "Aunt Maren, there's a hedgehog in the garden, and I think his foot is broken. Can we fix him?" Maren set down the pestle she had been holding and followed the child outside. The hedgehog was small, young, curled defensively beneath the rosemary hedge. Lucy knelt beside it with the careful reverence of a child who understood that some things were fragile. "His back foot," Lucy whispered. "See? It is bent wrong." Maren crouched beside her, her physician's eye assessing the injury. A fracture, likely from a fall. Survivable if they could immobilize it. "We will need a splint," Maren said. "Something very small. A twig, perhaps, and some soft cloth. I will find them." Lucy ran toward the garden shed, her grief momentarily forgotten in the urgency of rescue. Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. "Is it badly hurt?" Maren did not turn. A broken foot. Painful, but not fatal if we can set it properly. He knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the displacement of air, with the warmth of another body in her peripheral vision. "What can I do?" "Hold him, gently. He will try to curl tighter when I touch the injury, and I need him still." Nathaniel removed his gloves and reached for the hedgehog with hands that were, Maren noticed with a physician's trained eye, shaking slightly. He cradled the small creature against his palm, his fingers careful, and the hedgehog uncurled just enough to reveal the damaged foot. Lucy returned with a thin twig and a strip of torn muslin. "Will this work?" "Perfect." Maren took the materials and began to work, her hands steady and sure. "Your Grace, you will need to hold the bone straight while I bind it. Can you do that?" he answered quietly. Tell me how. She guided his fingers to the correct position, her hands over his, teaching the angle, the pressure. His hands were large, aristocratic, built for signing documents and holding reins. But he followed her instructions with absolute focus, holding the tiny, fragile bone exactly as she directed while she wrapped the splint. The hedgehog made a small sound of distress. Nathaniel's hands did not move. There, Maren said finally, sitting back. He will need to stay quiet for several weeks. We can make him a box in the still room. Lucy clapped her hands together. We saved him. You did, Nathaniel said quietly, looking at Maren. Your aunt did? Maren stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Lucy saved him by noticing. I simply have the training. She walked back to the house without waiting for his response, but she could feel his gaze on her back. Steady, unreadable, the weight of something she refused to name. The days developed a rhythm. Nathaniel arrived each morning as the clock struck 9 and stayed until 6. He read to Lucy in the afternoons, his deep voice performing the giant's part with surprising conviction. He helped her learn her letters, his patience infinite when she confused her B's and D's. He walked with her in the garden, listening to her chatter about the hedgehog, whom she had named Captain, and the names of all the herbs Aunt Maren was teaching her. Maren watched from a distance and told herself it was supervision, that joint guardianship required observation, that she was simply ensuring Lucy's welfare. She did not admit, even to herself, that she was watching him. On the 7th day, rain caught them on the field path. They had walked farther than intended, Lucy running ahead to chase a butterfly. Yes, and the October sky opened without warning. Nathaniel removed his coat immediately, but instead of draping it over Maren's shoulders, the gesture she expected, the one any gentleman would make, he wrapped it entirely around Lucy, lifting the child against his chest. And then he positioned himself between Maren and the wind. No fabric, no coat, just his body, shielding hers from the driving rain, his height and breadth forming a barrier as they walked back toward Briarfield. She could feel the heat of him through her wet dress, the solid presence of his shoulder blocking the wind that would have cut straight through her. Lucy laughed against his chest, safe and dry in the cocoon of his coat. Uncle Nathaniel, you are getting very wet. I am tall, he said, his voice carrying that almost smile again. I have more surface area to spare. Maren said nothing, but she noticed the geometry, the deliberate placement, the way he angled his body to take the worst of the weather. She filed it away with all the other observations she was not allowing herself to make. That night, after Lucy was asleep, Maren stood at her bedroom window and watched the rain. Her mind returned, unbidden, unwanted, to the feeling of standing behind him on the path. The shape of his shoulders, the way he had not asked permission, had simply moved between her and the storm, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She pulled the curtains closed and told herself it meant nothing. Lady Sybil Calder arrived at Briarfield on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, her carriage announcement enough to send the household into a flurry of preparation. Maren received her in the sitting room, tea already laid, her widow's composure firmly in place. Lady Langley? Sybil's greeting was correct but cold. I trust my nephew is settling in well. Lucy is adjusting, Maren replied. She asks for her father, but that is to be expected. And my other nephew? I understand Nathaniel has been spending considerable time here. The will requires it. Joint guardianship necessitates daily consultation. Sybil's mouth thinned. Edward was always unconventional in his affections. But I confess I am surprised he chose to place a Calder heir in the care of a physician's daughter. No matter how capable you may be, Lady Langley, there are standards of upbringing that I cannot provide. Maren's voice remained perfectly level. Lucy's education, her health, her emotional welfare. Which of these do you believe requires a title rather than training? I speak of appropriate society, proper connections. The child will inherit a considerable fortune. She should be raised among her equals. She's 5 years old and grieving. What she requires is love, not a list of appropriate connections. Sybil set down her teacup with a precision that suggested the conversation was finished. I simply wish to make my position clear. I will be watching this arrangement closely, Lady Langley, for Lucy's sake. After she left, Maren stood at the window and felt the old familiar tightness in her chest. the feeling of being measured and found wanting. Capable, yes. But capability was never quite enough. 3 days later, Maren was in the still room when she heard voices through the wall. Whilst the study shared a boundary with the still room, a quirk of Briarfield's old construction that Robert had always meant to fix, but never had. Nathaniel's voice, low and clear. She is managing well. Better than well. Lucy has stopped having nightmares every night. Last week it was 5 nights out of 7. This week, only 2. Another voice, Mr. Hadley, the solicitor. And you believe Lady Langley is the reason for the improvement? I know she is. She has a physician's training and a physician's mind. She understands what Lucy needs: routine, consistency, physical affection without performance. She is capable. But capability is not what Lucy needs. Maren's hand stilled on the mortar. What does the child need then? What any child needs. To be seen, to be held, to have someone who... The rest was lost as footsteps moved away from the wall. Maren stood in the still room, Sybil's words from 3 days ago echoing in her mind. Capable. The word every man who chose someone else had used. Capable, but not enough. Capable, but not what was needed. She found Martha in the kitchen. The Duke is in the study with Mr. Hadley, and when they finish, please send His Grace away. Martha's eyebrows rose. Ma'am? Tell him his presence is no longer required today. I will send word when he should return. Martha curtsied and left. Maren returned to the still room and tried to focus on the valerian she was preparing, tried not to hear the echo of Nathaniel's voice. Capability is not what Lucy needs. 20 minutes later, Martha appeared in the doorway. Ma'am, about the Duke. He is gone, I assume. Martha hesitated. No, ma'am. Maren looked up. I asked you to send him away. I did, ma'am. I delivered your message. He thanked me and walked outside. Then he has left. Martha shook her head slowly. No, ma'am. He's standing in the lane. Maren set down the pestle. Standing? Yes, ma'am. Just standing. Facing the door. How long has he been standing out there? Martha's expression was carefully neutral. Since you told him to leave, ma'am. Maren crossed the still room in 3 strides and went to the sitting room window. She pulled the curtain aside. Nathaniel stood in the lane perhaps 20 feet from Briarfield's door. The October rain had started again, light but steady, the kind that soaked through fabric slowly. He wore no coat, no hat. His hands hung at his sides, unperformed, and his face was tilted slightly upward, as though he were studying the house itself. He was not pacing, not seeking shelter, not performing patience or making a point. He was simply standing, in the rain, facing her door. Maren let the curtain fall. She did not open the door, but something inside her, something she had built carefully over 3 years, load-bearing and structural, cracked. Maren could not sleep that night. The image of Nathaniel in the rain played behind her closed eyes. His stillness, the way the water had darkened his shirt, the posture of a man who had given up arranging himself. Capability is not what Lucy needs. But she had heard only half the conversation, only the fragment through the wall. What had he said after? What had Hadley asked? The physician's daughter in her knew better than to diagnose from incomplete evidence. At 2 a.m, she rose and went to her writing desk. She had caught a name 3 weeks ago, overheard in a corridor conversation, when Nathaniel was speaking to Hadley about something medical. Dr. Pemberton, a London practice. She wrote the letter carefully, professionally, one physician to another, requesting clarification on a patient's history for the purposes of guardianship. The reply arrived in 3 days. Dear Lady Langley, I am pleased to provide the information you request regarding Lord Dunmore's consultation. His Grace came to our practice 6 months ago, at the insistence of his brother, Mr. Edward Calder, regarding a cardiac diagnosis made 5 years prior by the late Dr. Graves. Our examination found no evidence of constitutional weakness. The original diagnosis appears to have been overcautious, likely influenced by the family history of the late Duchess, but not supported by current medical evidence. I informed His Grace that his heart's strong and that he has been living under an unnecessary restriction. I hope this information serves the child's welfare. Yours in service, Dr. Marcus Pemberton Maren read the letter 3 times. a cardiac diagnosis, 5 years ago. The same year Nathaniel had withdrawn from her life, with such careful, devastating completeness. She rode to Dunmore village the next morning and found the old housekeeper in the cottage where she had retired after 40 years of service. Mrs. Brennan remembered everything. It was Dr. Graves who told him, my lady. He said he had his mother's weakness, that marriage and children would be a risk he should not take. His Grace was 27, came back from London white as death itself. Never spoke of it to anyone, but I saw the change. Saw him pull back from everything. From friends, from society, from the young lady he had been courting. Did he seek a second opinion? Not that I know of, my lady. He simply stopped everything except duty. Maren thanked her and rode back to Briarfield with 2 pieces of evidence in her hands. A fragment through a wall that sounded like dismissal, and a medical document that recasted 5 years of silence as fear. For the first time in 3 years, she chose to pursue understanding instead of reinforcing the wall. The crisis came on a Thursday night, 3 weeks into October. Lucy had been chasing Captain in the garden. The hedgehog had recovered enough to attempt escape, and she climbed the old stone wall to reach him. The wall was low, perhaps 4 feet, but the ground on the far side sloped away. Maren heard the scream from inside the house. She reached Lucy first. The child was on the ground, her left arm held at an unnatural angle, her face white with shock and pain. Nathaniel arrived seconds later, dropping to his knees beside them. "Her shoulder?" Maren said, her physician's training overriding everything else. "Dislocated. Nathaniel, I need you to hold her." "What do you need me to do?" "Sit against the wall. Hold her against your chest with both arms. She's going to fight me, and I need her completely still." He moved immediately, positioning himself and gathering Lucy into his arms. Like the child was crying now, great gulping sobs of pain and fear. "It hurts, Uncle Nathaniel, it hurts. I know, sweetheart. I know. Aunt Maren is going to fix it." Maren knelt in front of them, her hands already assessing the joint. "Lucy, darling, I need you to be very brave. This is going to hurt for a moment, but then it will feel much better. Can you do that?" Lucy nodded, tears streaming down her face. Maren looked at Nathaniel. His face was white, his jaw tight, and his hands, wrapped around Lucy, were shaking. "You are shaking," Maren said quietly. He answered simply, "I know. You have been shaking for 5 years. Not now. Now you hold still." His eyes met hers. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. He took a breath and his hands steadied. Maren set the joint with practiced precision. Lucy screamed. The sound cut through the October evening like a blade, and then quiet descended. The child went limp against Nathaniel's chest, her breathing evening out as the pain receded. Maren wrapped the shoulder quickly, efficiently, her hands moving through the familiar motions. When she finished, Lucy was already half asleep, exhausted from pain and fear. Nathaniel carried her inside and up to her room. Maren followed, directing him to lay the child on the bed. Lucy's eyes opened briefly. "Don't leave," she whispered. "Either of you, please." "We will not leave," Nathaniel said, his voice rough. They sat on opposite sides of Lucy's bed. Maren on the left, Nathaniel on the right. The child's breathing deepened, steadied. Sleep claimed her. In the quiet that followed, Maren spoke without looking at him. "Pemberton wrote to me." Nathaniel went completely still. "He confirmed that you consulted him 6 months ago, that the cardiac diagnosis was overcautious, that you spent 5 years living as though you were dying, and you are not. Maren, you could have told me." Her voice was quiet, but there was something beneath it. Something that had been building for 3 weeks, for 5 years, for every moment since she had watched him stand in the rain. 5 years ago, when Dr. Graves gave you that diagnosis, you could have told me. "I believe I am ill. Decide for yourself." 7 words. I would have chosen, "I am the daughter of a man who treated patients for 30 years. I understand risk. I understand probability." I would have chosen. He said it plainly. "I know." Instead, you chose for me. You decided that Maren Ashby, who nursed her father through pneumonia and her husband through consumption, could not bear the risk of loving a man who might die. I was terrified. The words fell into the room like stones. Terrified is forgivable. Maren said. Silence is not. Silence took the choice out of my hands. You gave me 5 years of believing I was measured and found insufficient. Do you understand what that does? Not to pride, to the mechanism. The part of a person that reaches toward another person? You broke that mechanism. I rebuilt it around no, because no is the only word that cannot be taken from you by someone who walks away. Lucy shifted in her sleep, her hand reaching out. Maren took it automatically, her fingers closing around the small, warm palm. Edward was the one who made you go to Pemberton? Maren said. Edward said I was rehearsing a death that might never come. 3 weeks later, he fell from a horse. And you carried both, the wrong diagnosis and his death, to the solicitor's office where you looked at me for the first time in 5 years. He confirmed it quietly. Yes. You stood in rain for 5 hours. My body would not let me leave twice. Your body was braver than you were. He agreed without hesitation. Yes. The quiet stretched, Lucy's breathing, the fire crackling in the grate, 2 adults with a sleeping child between them, having the conversation they should have had at 23. I cannot give back 5 years, Nathaniel said finally. She answered simply. No. But I can stand in weather. I can hold a child. I can stay when you tell me to go. I can be here tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, until no is a choice you are making instead of a wall you are hiding behind. That is not romantic. It is accurate. Romance is what I tried at 27. Accuracy is what I owe you at 32. Maren looked at him across Lucy's sleeping form. His shirt was still damp from carrying the child through the evening dew. His hands, around Lucy's blanket, were finally still. Stay tonight, she said. In the spare room, she will wake and ask for you. She will ask for you. She will ask for both of us. Edward knew that. Edward always knew. Lucy woke twice that night, calling for her father. Each time, Maren and Nathaniel came from opposite sides of the house and met at her bedside. The second time, they stayed. Maren on the left side of the bed, and Nathaniel on the right, holding Lucy between them until she fell back asleep. In the dark, their hands found each other across the child's blanket. Maren's fingers interlocked with his. Her thumb traced an unconscious circle on the back of his hand. A physician's habit, checking pulse, verifying life. He held still and received the touch, his hand warm and steady under hers. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them pulled away. When morning came, Martha brought the news with Nathaniel's coffee. Lady Sybil's solicitor had filed a formal petition for interim custody. The challenge would be heard within the month. Nathaniel set down his cup and looked at Maren across the breakfast table. Lucy was still asleep upstairs, her shoulder healing, her nightmares temporarily quieted by the presence of 2 adults who had stayed. Unless then we prepare, he said. The we was no longer guardianship. It was foundation. Lady Sybil arrived at Briarfield 3 weeks later with her solicitor in tow. She did not wait for an invitation to the sitting room, simply walked in as though the house were already hers to command. Lady Langley? Nathaniel? She nodded to each of them. I believe you know why I'm here. Your petition, Maren said. Her voice was steady. She had prepared for this moment, had spent 3 weeks ensuring that every record of Lucy's care was documented, every decision justified. I received the notice. Then you understand that I am acting in Lucy's best interest. A child of her station requires appropriate guidance. While I am certain you have done your best, Lady Langley, there are standards of upbringing that... Maren stood abruptly. Stop. Paul, you will not do this in my sitting room. You will not reduce Lucy's welfare to a question of station while she sleeps upstairs in a house where she is loved. Sybil's eyebrows rose. Loved is not the same as appropriately raised. Then let me tell you what appropriate raising looks like in this house. Maren's hands were steady at her sides. Lucy has woken with nightmares 43 times since September. I have held her through every one. I know the sound of her breathing when the dream begins. I know she needs the left hand held first, because that was the hand Edward held when they walked. I possess a cottage with skylights, because my husband believed children should see the weather. And I possess the knowledge, earned, not inherited, of what a grieving child needs. She needs routine, she needs physical affection, and she needs adults who do not perform love, but live it. Those things do not require a title, Lady Sybil. They require presence. Sybil turned to Nathaniel, Surely you agree that the family imprisoned itself in duty for 2 generations and produced one man who knew how to love, Nathaniel said quietly. And he is dead. Edward named 2 guardians, not 1, not Dunmore Hall. He named the woman who holds his daughter at night and the brother who arrives every morning. He looked at his aunt, and his voice, when he spoke again, carried the weight of every choice he had made and unmade in 32 years. I will not support your petition. I will oppose it. And if you proceed, you will face a duke testifying against his own household in favor of a physician's daughter who runs a cottage with skylights and splints hedgehogs and is braver than every Calder who has lived in that hall for 3 generations, including me. Sybil's face went white. You are choosing a village widow over your family. I am choosing the only family Edward trusted to build. The room held its breath. Sybil stood. Her solicitor gathered his papers. They left without another word. Maren remained standing until the carriage pulled away. Then her knees gave out, and she sat down hard in the nearest chair. Nathaniel crossed the room and knelt in front of her. Are you all right? You defied your aunt. I defied a petition. In your brother's child's name. In a physician's daughter's sitting room. It seemed the appropriate venue. Your rug, your terms. Maren looked at him, kneeling on her floor, his hands resting on his knees, his face open in a way she had never seen it. I am not going to thank you. I did not ask. Staying is the minimum. Staying is what you owed me before you owed me anything else. Then I will stay, and I will expect correction, argument, supervision of my Latin, and the occasional acknowledgement that I'm trying. She said it quietly. You are trying. Is that the acknowledgement? It is the beginning of one. She stood. He rose with her, and they were suddenly very close. Close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the one he had gotten falling from a tree at 12. Close enough to feel the warmth of him, on the solid reality of a man who had stood in rain and knelt on her floor and told his family to go to hell in her defense. She reached out and gripped his coat lapel. Do not move. He went still. She rose on her toes and kissed him. He did not pull her closer, did not cup her face or wrap his arms around her. Instead, he placed his hands flat against the doorframe behind him, bracing himself against her house, in her room, while she closed the distance. The kiss was not gentle. It was the force of a woman who had said no for 3 years, discovering that yes required more courage than anything she had survived. It was the taste of rain and risk and 5 years of silence finally broken. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed, his breathing uneven. Your heart is strong, she said quietly. And the specialist confirmed. I am not quoting the specialist. I am telling you. I have been trained to feel it. She placed her hand over his chest. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat was steady and sure. He opened his eyes and looked at her. I love you. I have loved you since I was 27, and I will love you until this strong heart stops beating. And if you need me to stand in rain, or kneel on floors, or defy every member of my family to prove it, I will do that. Every day. For as long as you let me. Then stay, Maren said. Not in the spare room. Not at Dunmore Hall. Stay here. With me. With Lucy. With the family Edward trusted us to build. He answered without hesitation. Yes. One word. Simple. Absolute. Outside, the November rain had started again. But inside Briarfield, the fire burned warm and bright. Spring came to Briarfield with a rush of green and gold. Lucy planted foxglove in the garden with surgical seriousness, her small hands patting the earth with the same precision Maren had taught her for splinting hedgehogs. Nathaniel held the watering can, his sleeves rolled up, his title abandoned somewhere in the house with his coat and gloves. Aunt Maren says foxglove is beautiful and poisonous, Lucy announced. Medicinally accurate, Nathaniel agreed. She says people are like that too. Looked toward the cottage step where Maren sat drinking tea. She was not trying to overhear. She was failing. Did you call me poisonous? He called. I called you beautiful and poisonous, Maren replied. The sequence matters. Proximity is the antidote? Proximity is the antidote to most things, including 5 years of stupidity. Martha appeared with a second teacup and set it on the step beside Maren's. She had been setting 2 cups since November. Lucy finished patting the earth and stood back to admire her work. Captain would like the foxglove, I think, when he comes back to visit. The hedgehog, fully healed, had been released into the garden 6 weeks ago. He returned every evening for the dish of mealworms Lucy left by the rosemary hedge. I think you are right, Nathaniel said. He set down the watering can and lifted Lucy onto his shoulders. Now, shall we go see if Aunt Maren has biscuits? She always has biscuits. She says a house without biscuits is a house without hope. Your Aunt Maren is a very wise woman. I know. That is why Papa left me with her, and with you, and because together you make sense. Nathaniel carried her toward the cottage, and Maren stood to receive them, her hands already reaching for the child, her smile warm and real. Summer evening. The sitting room at Briarfield. 2 chairs by the window, the same window where Maren had stood in October and watched a man stand in rain. Martha says you stood in the lane again this morning, Maren said, her fingers working through the mending in her lap. I was waiting for the gate to open. The gate was open. Then I was standing because I stood there once in October, and it is the most important thing I have ever done, and my body returns to it the way your father's patients returned to the dispensary. Not because they were ill, but because they remembered being healed there. Maren set down the mending and reached for his hand. She found his pulse at the wrist and held it, counting, verifying. The physician's daughter's way of saying, you are here, and I am checking. His pulse was steady, strong. Outside, the lane was empty. The gate stood open. Lucy slept upstairs in a room with a skylight and a stuffed rabbit named Captain. Inside, the fire burned low. 2 teacups sat on the table between them. Maren's fingers remained on Nathaniel's wrist, feeling the proof of life beneath her touch. I am staying, he said quietly. She answered simply, I know, for as long as you let me. Then you should prepare yourself, Your Grace. I am a very stubborn woman. Once I decide to keep something, I do not let it go easily. Nathaniel said it with certainty. Good, neither do I. The evening deepened. The fire crackled. Upstairs, a child dreamed without nightmares. And in the sitting room at Briarfield, 2 people who had spent 5 years apart sat together in the warm summer dark and did not let go. Everything staying.